persuade us to be merciful, to act with mercy to someone who does not deserve mercy, is not what persuades us found in our inner being, in our hearts, because we have responded to God's remarkable grace and costly forgiveness for us. We who are entirely undeserving of God's love of us. William Shakespeare had a well-developed sense of biblical themes and their application to the human condition. And showing mercy was one of them. And you might recall the familiar quotation from The Merchant of Venice, when Portia asked Shylock to show mercy. And he said to her, "On what compulsion must I?" And she responded, "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this scepter sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute of God himself. And earthly power doth then show like God's when mercy seasons justice." What compels us to show mercy? To act intentionally with kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and generosity towards someone who deserves to be dealt with differently. It is first of all having a heart out of which mercy flows. Twice in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus quoted from the Old Testament, from Hosea chapter 6, where God said, "I want mercy and not sacrifice." Religious sacrifices can be done casually, they can be done by habit, with little thought or meaning or personal consequences in our behavior. But mercy calls for our intentional identification with someone else. My theologian friend Dale Bruner observes that God's call for mercy in Hosea is the Old Testament equivalent of the New Testament's golden rule. Do for others what you want them to do for you. This is the meaning of the law of Moses and of the teachings of the prophets. And guess what? It was Jesus who said those words in chapter 7, verse 2, again of Matthew's Gospel. So for Jesus, a fundamental priority in beatitude living is showing mercy graciously to those who do not deserve mercy. St. Augustine, who lived in the 4th century, is accepted by most scholars as the most important figure in the ancient Western Church. And he said that those who act with mercy are also those who come to the aid of the needy. Ambrose, another theologian and church leader in the 4th century, wrote this: "There's your brother, naked and crying, and you stand confused over the choice of an attractive floor covering." That's the 4th century, not the 21st. In his book, The Best-Kept Secret of Christian Mission, author John Dixon writes about a fellow by the name of Tim Winton. And Tim Winton is Australia's most celebrated novelist. He's won several awards and has authored many critical novels. And he's also well known for his Christian faith. Winton was interviewed on a television show, and asked about the time a stranger visited his family. That visit profoundly affected young Tim, as well as the rest of his family. And Dixon, in his book, sums up Winton's response. Tim Winton told how his father, a policeman, had been in a terrible accident in the mid-1960s. He was knocked off his motorcycle by a drunk driver. And after weeks in a coma, he was allowed home. And Winton said, "My father was like an earlier version of my father, a sort of augmented version. He was sort of recognizable, but not totally my dad. Everything was busted up, and they put him in the chair, and I was terrified." Winton's father was a big man, and his wife had a great deal of trouble bathing him each day. There was nothing that Tim, 5 years old at the time, could do to help. News of the family situation got out into the local community, and shortly after, Winton recalls, there was a knock at the door. "Oh, good day, my name's Len," said the stranger to Mrs. Winton. "I heard your hubby's not well. Anything I can do?" Len Thomas was from the local church. Winton explained. This man had heard about the family's difficulties and wanted to help. "He just showed up," Winton said. "And he used to carry my dad from the bed and he'd put him in the bath and he used to bathe him." Which in the 1960s, in Perth, Australia, in the suburbs, was not the sort of thing you saw every day. According to Winton, this simple act of kindness from a single Christian had a powerful effect. It really touched me, he said, in that regardless of theology or anything else, watching a grown man bother for nothing to show up and wash a sick man, it really affected me. Jesus says those who show mercy will be blessed by God. So we rightly ask the question, when will God show mercy? There are at least three answers we can give because of what we know from the entirety of Scripture. First, God has already shown His mercy to the world in Jesus' death on the cross for the forgiveness of sins. We hear this often, I know. But underlying the 70 times 7 forgiveness theme, that Jesus prefaced His story about the king and the unforgiving servant, is the costly and generous and amazing mercy of God in Jesus Christ for us. And Jesus did that for all humanity. Second, those who act with mercy toward others will themselves be treated with mercy in the future on God's final day of judgment. You see, mercy and forgiveness are not meant to be withheld, but passed on to others. And so God promises He will be merciful and forgiving to those who intentionally act with mercy to others who do not deserve mercy any more than we do. But where forgiveness and mercy and kindness are not passed on to others, there is judgment. And then there is a third sense of when God shows mercy. And it's included in today's call to worship and also in the words of assurance, the words of God's forgiving love. Week after week, when I put those pieces together, I try to catch a sense of what is the overall theme. They're not there for nothing. God said to our spiritual ancestor Moses, "I am God, the God of mercy and grace, endlessly patient, with so much love and forgiveness for you." And then the words of assurance reminded us, and adapted from